Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of The Brutal Truth About Sales and Selling podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about stories. Now, I think the word stories has been kind of overused, but really what it is it's a structured discussion. It's taking somebody from a particular time and place and moving them forward. It's kind of an advanced selling skill. Too many people have scripts, have talking points, have PowerPoints. But what we do need to do is be able to, within a couple of minutes, convey value, convey context, convey need, convey problems, and get people thinking different. Everyone's naturally in this kind of cone of comfort, and our job is to get them out of that. What we want to do is get them to open up their mind and start thinking differently. But we have to come up with an easy way to do it. We can't go to school for 6 months to learn how to do it. We have to come up with a predefined, rehearsed discussion. And, if the word story turns you off, I think you just got to think about it a little bit differently to give people a journey that they can go through. Excuse me, and have them come out with an outcome that they desire. So we're going to get into a little briefing on this, like 7 kinds of stories, but come up with one. Start with one short one, like what your customer goes through, what they look like before you show up, what is the process that you take them through, and what is the outcome that they get. And I think you'll get a lot out of this. I think some of us do it naturally. Others have to learn this. Like I've got the questions course. Questions are the easiest. Stories get a little bit harder. Scripts get hard because you sound like you're reading off a script. And nothing makes a person feel more, sold to than being read off of a script. So before we get into this, I want to make sure you're checking out covideo.com. Check out Video Email. Give it a try. I'm telling you, 2018 was the year of video for me. Changed my business. Easily 300% increase, not just through Video Email, but video on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. All of these places I've been able to connect with you, salespeople who want to get better, who want to make more money, who want a better quality of life, want to learn what is working today. And one of them is Video Email. Also check out Nudge.ai and Pipedrive. You both have a coupon code of Brutal Truth. Get 1 month free and invest a little bit of time, maybe a week, to see how you can apply these tools to automate and leverage technology into your sales process. 2019 is going to be the year of working smarter. The working harder thing kind of hit the wall this year. All these sales automation things are driving people crazy, including me. What we first have to do is focus on the people who are most likely to be interested, who are most likely to be receptive to what we're talking about. And we got to use technology to find those people and spend our most precious resource, our time, on the people that matter most and approach them differently. If you act like a sales rep, you will get treated like one. That's the junk box. That's the voicemail delete. Let's stay out of there. Let's talk to people as human beings. Make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. I got a free ebook there. All you have to do is type in your email address, hit submit, and I email you a link, not the book, a link to the book. So you just have to click on the link to download the book, and it's all free. And if you want to schedule a call to talk about the training opportunities, things are going to be really cooking in 2019. It's all at B2B Revenue, right underneath training. You can check out the courses and schedule a time. Let's get into the interview. Yes, let's dig into it.
Sure.
What are the key stories that each sales rep?
Yeah, I structured the book around a buying journey, which is really the sales journey. In fact, I translated it to the sales journey. So the sales journey is connecting with a potential client. You have to connect, you have to build rapport, and then differentiating your services, your product, your idea, and then closing the deal, landing the deal. So those are the 3 phases or 3 parts of the book. And there are 7 stories associated with those three parts. So in the connecting, what I call hook, I use a fishing analogy. And so the hook is your company story, a personal story. I've told you a bit about my personal story. And the key staff story, the story of the important players in your company that your client will need to know if they're going to do business with you. That might be your technical sales specialist, or maybe your CEO, or your head of customer service, or head of support, whoever are the important people that you'll need to hand over to through the sale that your client needs to know about. You should be able to tell their story in a narrative. So those are the connection stories, those three. And then we move into differentiating, fighting for mind share, really. And that's an insight story. There's a lot of talk about insight. The Challenger books have done very well. But those books don't really go into detail about how you should educate your client about your insight. And the best way to do that is to tell the story about how you discovered that insight. Yeah. If you can take your client on that journey, then they will learn as you learnt that insight. And that's a very powerful way to get across information that might otherwise sound a bit arrogant. You know, you're saying that you know something about their market that they don't know, or that they really should know. But by telling them the story about how you learnt that thing, how your research department learnt it, or the method, the way that you came about it, it's a very easy way to deliver insight, and they get it and they don't push back. And that's an important story for salespeople. The next one is a very misunderstood story. I call it success story. In sales, people talk a lot about case studies, but a case study is not really a success story. Success story has to place the client as the central character in the story. I'll give you an example. When I'd written the book, the manuscript, but we're still waiting to have it published, I shared the manuscript with a few people who are sales authors around. So, well, Mike Bosworth, who ended up writing the foreword for the book, for one, and Mike Weinberg and various other people. And I was connected with a fellow in Europe, and he'd written a couple of sales books himself, and he was happy to receive the manuscript. We chatted on LinkedIn. I never met him face to face. And he sent me an email back a few days later and said he was really enjoying the book. He was getting into it. And then a few days later, another email, and he said, Mike, this is amazing. You know, I've been teaching B2B sales. I've written books on sales process, and I've never really incorporated stories the way you explain it. And I've redone my process. He had been teaching sales teams in a classic B2B training role, and had switched his business model to go one-on-one coaching salespeople. So he changed the way his business was working, and he'd had to change his sales process. And by incorporating a couple of the stories that I'd explained in the book, the whole thing was going a whole lot better for him than it had been. And as you know, in consulting, learning how to sell better is unpaid activity. And so really, he was really excited about it, and we ended up connecting on a Zoom meeting, and I coached him on his personal story and his success story example, and he's been a fantastic advocate for the book as well. So that's a success story. I've told it from his perspective. I'm the guide. I'm the person that helped him in that process, but he was the one that managed to change his business using some ideas from the book from my company. So those two stories, the insight story and the success story, they're the stories that we use to differentiate our products and services, to fight for mind share. We move it. Go for it, Brian.
Yeah. So how is a story different than a pitch in your mind? Or like when you...
Yeah, that's critically important to understand.
Yeah.
A story has to be a narrative. It has to be a sequence of events. It started here, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. If it's not a narrative, it's not a story.
Okay.
So we tend to take stories and turn them into bullet points and pitches, and then they lose their power. And there's a very good neuroscience reason for that. Our mind's continually trying to predict what's going to happen next, what I'm going to say next, what we're going to see next. And stories are naturally unpredictable, so they keep our attention. But if we stop it from being a sequence of events, it stops being a story and we no longer pay attention. So that's the critical. Does that make sense to you, Brian? That's the critical feature of a story. Now, it must make a business point if it's a business story,
Right.
but it's not a story at all if it's not a sequence of events, if it's not a narrative.
And how hard is it to teach people how to tell a good story? I mean, you must have some experience with that by now.
Yeah, I run public workshops to do that, and I do that with my clients. And I've figured out a way over the 4 years doing that, Brian. And it's look, most people tell stories fairly naturally, informally, at a barbecue or in a bar or in a pub. You know, they tell anecdotes. So that's not so difficult. But what I found I've needed to do is to help salespeople find good stories. There are thousands of sort of average stories, but what are the really good ones? And the good ones are the ones that really have you hanging. What is he going to say next? And they really make a point. They really make that business point that you want to make. So that's what I do. So that can take a bit of research and a bit of work with maybe the CEO or some of the better salespeople to find the good stories. And then we usually record them on video. They're typically not more than a couple of minutes long. And then I get the sales guys to practice them. And for that, we use WhatsApp. And WhatsApp is a fabulous tool for practicing conversation, because particularly using video, because when you record a video on WhatsApp, it shows you the video before you send it, and you can listen to yourself. And then you can say you don't like it, so you delete it and start again. So that's where you get the repetitions. And when you've told the story, I'm going to say about 10, 15 times, it starts to be pretty tight.
Yeah.
And it's good for
how do you get people to do that without feeling awkward or annoyed?
It's interesting, Brian. It's people are interested in the story, and they're interested in trying to tell it. And what they notice is when they first tell it, it's way too long. You know, what should be a 2-minute story takes 5 minutes, and usually with a bit of backwards and forwards. So I do this privately, and I do this with all the salespeople in the whole teams that I work with, and it's pretty efficient time-wise for me, because I listen to the story, make a couple of suggestions, or else I tell the story back in 2 minutes for them. Say, look, here's an example of that story in just 2 minutes. And then they go and practice it back. And, you know, they want to do a nice job. They know they're working with me and they'd like to try. So they keep going. So it probably takes them 10, 15 goes, and then they get their story down nice and tight. But then, you know, within a few days when they've used it, they give me a call and tell me how well it works and how they enjoy telling it. So it's worth the effort.
And can you give us an example? Maybe like what's a story you tell when you're trying to get into a new client?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So I would generally tell my personal story. Now, I told you a bit of a version of how I got into sales and why I got into consulting personal story. But, you know, if you've been in business a fair while, as you and I have, there are many things you could include in your personal story, and I'll adapt that depending on the situation. You know, if I'm talking to someone from a particular industry, I'll probably include something around my experience from that industry. So I'll tell my personal story, and then if I can, I'll tell a success story, because that's a success story, if you have one, is the best story to explain why they should work with you.
Yeah, maybe one of your clients, if you could tell us, you know, what they were trying to sell, what they were facing.
Sure. Okay, so I'll tell you the story of one of my early clients when I first started consulting. As a partner in a financial services company. He was in partnership with his brother. So his brother had the CEO role, and he was like chief operations officer, had quite a few staff, and they'd invested a lot of money, close to $1 million, in software to manage the finances of high net worth individuals. So these are people who have complex business and personal finances that are all mixed up. And that was their target market. And I won't give the guy's name. We'll call him, say, Jeff. And so Jeff was in charge of that software development project, got it working after a couple of years, and then needed to sell it. And he was an accountant and not particularly outgoing kind of person. And he really struggled. He wasn't able to sell it. And his brother, who had been selling other parts of the business, was starting to give him a pretty hard time. And they didn't get on all that well, these two brothers. So anyway, he came to me via my business partner, and I did an assessment of his conversation technique and looked at some of the emails he was sending out. And I thought, you should hire a salesperson because, you have no rapport and really it will take a lot of effort. And he said, look, yeah, I'll do that. I'll hire salespeople, but I really want to know how to do it myself first. So I said, okay. And so we put him on a program, prospecting, meetings, questioning, stories, storytelling as well. I actually went with him for some client meetings, a couple of them. And over a period of about 5 or 6 months, he was such a good student and he started to really turn it around and he was selling. And then he had a big falling out with his brother. They almost went to court, litigation with each other, almost stopped the business completely. And in the end, he ended up with the company, and his brother went and did something else. And his business is going brilliantly. He's able to sell himself. He has a sales team now. He's building his own sales team, but he learned how to do that. One of the best students I've ever had in terms of really following instructions. And that's him now. He's taught himself to do something that was not natural at all to him. But
so how important is that conflict, like that court case that you just put into that? That piqued my interest. Is that adding some kind of
the
drama?
fact that he fell out with his brother?
Yeah.
The steps to a success story are the situation that your client is in,
yep,
the problem they find themselves in, the challenge they find themselves in. So he had to sell that software system that he developed. And then he meets a guide, that was me and our company,
yep,
who provides them with a plan. And that plan was a pretty regimented development program around prospecting and meeting skills and storytelling. He follows the plan. He avoids failure. Now, the near failure came when his company nearly fell apart in the fallout with his brother. But then he achieved success and he's transformed. And he is transformed. He can now sell. So those are the 6 steps of a success story. And they're quite different from your classic case study. The case study is like the client's personality and as a central character is usually removed in a case study. And that's done because marketing departments feel like they can't get the permission to name the clients and they don't really want to, make it a story like that. So they abstract it to bullet points. And the bullet points are, this was the situation, this is how we helped, and this is how it is now. But you lose the narrative when you do that.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't connect in the same way as a story does.
And how much of it is art versus science? Can you take somebody who just doesn't have much of a personality, but give them those elements? And
you can. Well, I'm an engineer. So, this is my character, Brian, is I want to understand how things work.
Yeah.
We engineers want to know how it works. And once we know how it works, rinse and repeat.
Right.
And so I believe anyone can do it, but it's really important that I've been talking about telling stories, but we're telling stories for a reason. And particularly with connection stories, the reason is so that I can ask my client, well, enough about me, what about you? We want to prompt for a story. And the essence of this, when the selling interaction really goes well, is when we get into an exchange of stories. So I'll tell you a bit about me, you'll tell me a bit about you, and then I'll tell you a success story of a client, and I'll say, well, what about you? How are things around here? And they'll start telling a story about how things are in their business. So the critical thing here and what really works is the exchange. And what I ask the salespeople, when I've been coaching them on storytelling is, well, did you tell your story? And they'll tell me, yeah, I told it. And then what story did you hear back? And that's when it really starts to work. And this is what the very best salespeople do naturally, mostly unconsciously. That's exactly what they do. You have to have your ear really open to notice it. Some of them are just continual stories. I have some clients and founders of pretty reasonable sized companies, and that almost story after story. It's incredible how much storytelling they do, but their salespeople don't have those stories. So they're frustrated that the salespeople can't sell like they can, but then the sales guys need to know the stories, and they need to practice them.
And it seems a whole lot more genuine and effective than just, listing off features and functions and telling the person about a product or a service.
All the features and functions and the things that you want to say can be just included in the story, and then they just naturally go in. It doesn't sound like pitching at all.
Yeah.
And that's, and the company story is a good example. You might want to say, our company is in every major city in the US, and we're the leading one in this and that, and all of these things that every salesperson in every company says. But if you just step back and you explain, this is how we were founded, this is where we started, here's how we nearly went out of business, and then we just got this magic first client, and everything clicked, and now we've managed to, and then we started to expand out to this city and that city. Now I'm telling a narrative, and coming along for the ride is the fact that we're in this city and we got to be the best in our niche. All of those things just come along in the company story, and your client happily listens.
And how long do you really have for each?
That's a good question. I don't think you have more than 3 minutes in pretty much any case. The personal story is the hardest one to get short, and also the hardest story to really nail. But the other stories, the insight stories and success stories, usually can be told in a minute and a half, and still get all the information across. But your client is interested. They don't know what you're going to say next, so they're listening, they're concentrating, and it works well.
And how do you build drama and suspense into it? Is it to kind of build a mystery?
Yeah, I have a structure that I teach. I have two structures, but most stories fall within a simple 4-part structure, and the parts are a setting, and that's a time and a place. So I said I was in the UK, and then we moved to Norway, and it was 20 years ago. Actually, at the end, I told you it was in 1996. Place is actually more important than time. When we tell someone where something happens, it's a very powerful memory cue.
Yeah.
Our memories are very tightly linked to place, and we remember places. So it started here at that time, and then something went wrong, strange happened, some complication.
Yeah.
So that's the second part of the story. And then there's a resolution. Then we start to fix that thing, and then we finish it with making our point. We make our business point is the 4th part. So just 4 parts. And generally, I'll do a half-day session working on success stories, teach that structure. And then we just go around and people start telling the stories, and we bring it back. The stories fail for several repeatable, predictable reasons. The first one is they fail because they're not a sequence of events. Secondly, they fail because they don't start with a time and a place. That's the universal trigger to tell your client that a story is coming, and just relax and listen. This is going to be enjoyable. So if you don't start that way, that they might not realize it's a story and they get confused. And then some kind of complication, things going wrong, and then just pull it back. We like stories that have a happy ending. And so then pull it back to how it got fixed, and then make your point. If it's not making a business point, then you're just wasting people's time. It belongs in the bar, in the pub afterwards. So that's the structure. It's pretty simple. And then it's just a matter of getting your events and and practicing them.
Cool. And so tell us about the book. Where's it available? What formats? And what will people get out of it?
Yeah. Do I have time to tell you the other two stories briefly?
Oh, sure.
This is landing the deal. So when it comes to landing the deal, and I've spent a lot of time on, really big, multi-tens, hundreds of $1 million deals, they always go to tender. You always have this period of time when you don't know what's going on. Are you going to win this deal, your competitor? What can you do in that time? And this is what I learned really in big ticket telecom sales. Value stories and teaching stories. So the value stories is stories about how your company will behave if things go wrong. Particularly with big deals, there's risk on the client side. The stakeholder committee are trying to decide, are they going to lose their jobs? Will this thing really work? Is this the right investment for their company? So I'll give you an example of a value story. When I worked in Siemens, I happened to be in our country, Australia's CEO's office, when he heard the news about a failure on one of the big projects they were working on. It was an electricity cable project that was subsea cable going from mainland Australia to Tasmania, where I grew up. And Siemens was providing one of the major components, which was the inverter transformers that convert AC to DC electricity. And the ship that was bringing these things from Germany hit a storm in the Great Australian Bight and broke its rudder, and all 6 of the main transformers were smashed. And this thing, those components were on the critical path, and this was a highly political, multi-billion-dollar project, and it looked like the delivery, the deadline for getting the project done was now under serious threat. So I was in the CEO's office, Albert, and he was telling me about it. And he'd just that night before talked to Germany, and they had agreed to fast track construction of 6 new transformers without any discussion about who was at fault, who was going to pay the cost. And they managed to build in 5 months what had taken well over a year to build in the first instance, and the project was delivered on time. And that's the kind of story that wins big deals, Brian. This is the story that your client really wants to know. And you might think, well, how can that story help? And it's subtle. So you think about your decision team sitting in a meeting deciding, are we going to go with Siemens or are we going to go with this other company? And then someone says, well, what happens if it doesn't work? And the guy that's heard that story is like, he's fighting for you. It's going to work. I trust these guys. It's Siemens. And that's because he's heard this kind of story, and not just one. This is the thing that amazed me the most when I joined that company. It's not a sales and marketing kind of organization. It's a heavy engineering company. But the value of the company is when you sign on the dotted line, you get what you sign for, whatever. And that's a really important value of their company. Now, your company might have different values. It might be lower price or fast delivery or whatever. But if you can find stories that prove to your client, this is really what we value and this is how we behave, then it can really help you at that decision time in a big deal, when the client's trying to decide. And the final type of story, I won't give you an example, is what I call a teaching story. But you're quite often in the situation in large deals where you've got a good connection with your sponsor, someone who would like to have you in their company, but they're fighting on your behalf in their stakeholder meeting, and you need to teach them how to get the deal done. You know how to get the deal done because you've done that kind of deal with other companies. So you need to use stories to help them get through the typical roadblocks of a stakeholder decision meeting. Roadblocks like delay, difficult person on the committee, someone who's got different agendas, people playing politics. And there are really good stories, if you've done enough of those deals, that you can deploy that you can help your sponsor fight your case. Even though you're not there, these are stories that work in absentia. They work on your behalf because you've taught your client how to sell, if you like, how to persuade within the decision meeting. So those are the 7 stories, value stories and teaching stories for closing the deal.
Excellent. So where do people get the book?
They can get the book just about anywhere, Brian, on Amazon as a Kindle, a hardback, a softback, at Booktopia, Barnes & Noble.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Check it out, the 7 stories, and try it. Try to come up with one of your most successful accounts. What was it look like before you went in? Why did they make the change? What was the process they went through? And what was the outcome that they got? Let me give you an example. I've got a lot of students that have been taking the start the conversation, get the meeting. And several of them have gone from, totally abandoning cold call and cold emails, being able to come up with a system, either outsourcing it or automating it and booking up their weeks full of new opportunities. Now, in a natural, organic way that's fun and it works. 80% response rates on emails. It crushes it without having to do a ton of research, having it all automated, using technology, and connecting with people the way they want to be connected with. How would you like that? I love it. My business is blown up because of it. This is basically a technique that I've been teaching for the last 5 years in person. I put it online, and I make it a year long because what ends up happening is people need a long time to get used to a new approach, to try it, to try different things, to see what's working for other people. Every industry is different. Every culture is different. Every geography is different. Every person is different. But this resonates through all of that and cuts through all the noise to enable you to fill up your week with meetings. Now, how about if you say, that's not my problem? I got plenty of leads. My problem is my deals stall. They die. They go to no decision. That's why we have closing the complex sale. No one teaches this. That's why I wrote the book. And even after you write the book, it is so much more than just knowing. It's doing, it's preventing, it's rehearsing, it's coming up with a strategy. Your strategy, not mine. Every complex deal has these elements and these ingredients, but each of them is mixed different, and the outcome happens. So if you really want to dig in and blow your number out in 2019, sign up for the courses. You can pay all at once or in 12 payments, but it is a commitment. It's not a membership. It's not a subscription. It is a year commitment to you becoming a great salesperson. And in the complex sale course, I'm going to include a year to excellence. This is everything else other than strategy. It's all the skills, the questioning, the mindset, the energy level. Every element of sales I'm going to document and produce, and it'll be a separate course probably by the middle of the year, depending on how much time I have to work on it. And I really wanted to sit down and go, I'm teaching a lot of stuff, but there's so much more to sales than just strategy and process and prevention and, getting meetings. There's still a lot more. And what I should do is document the best practices from the best people and apply them to the complex sale. So you'll get that included if you sign up probably by the end of January, and definitely get in as soon as possible. I'm not sure when I'm going to raise the prices, but everyone's saying this is too good. So what you get with it, it's not just an online course. You get a community. You get office hours every 2 weeks. All questions are answered, and create new content for that. You get one-on-ones, unlimited sales coaching. As long as I can add it to the course, you get unlimited sales coaching, and as long as it's applicable to the course as well. And you get the community. So you get to hear other people in other industries and other ways of doing it. And you get feedback. And that's that interaction that you really need. I'm not your manager. My focus is 100% on you being successful. And I will help you as much as I possibly can and help the community. I want this to be a whole new approach to helping salespeople. Because too many of us, we don't have anybody who's really dedicated to our success. Our managers have their own agenda. Uh, and that's to make them successful, not you. They want to make you successful to the extent that it makes them successful. What you need is somebody who's on your side, who has your back. So check that out at b2brevenue.com. Stay in touch. I really appreciate those of you who connect with me on LinkedIn and share my content on LinkedIn and tell somebody about the podcast. You're my sales force, and I count on you, and I appreciate you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. And I really would appreciate everybody who goes onto LinkedIn, connects up with me, or follows me there. If you happen to see some of my content flying by, if you could throw a little thumbs up or a comment or a share, I definitely appreciate it. It helps spread the word about the podcast. And make sure you're checking out my website, b2brevenue.com. You can get my free book on how companies make product selections. It's a real book. It is on Amazon, but I give it away for free. Just register there. It'll email you a link to it, and you can just download the PDF from there. Also, if you want to check out the courses, start the conversation, get the meeting, or closing the complex sale, and you have more questions about it, the short answer is there are video courses. You get access for a year, but it's also a community. What does that mean? You can ask questions anytime via voicemail or email. I answer them within a week, put them into the course. We have office hours every other week. It's an hour long course where you can I pick a topic, answer questions, you can ask questions. Also, you can schedule one-on-ones for free, and we just talk through your particular use case, and that gets shared with the course. So if you don't have time for office hours, or the timing doesn't work, or you just want some more one-on-one help, that's all included for a whole year. So it's really a year to go from where you are to where you want to be. And so it's not just videos, it's not just knowledge, it's practice, it's getting feedback. You can send me emails, you can send me your presentation. I'll help you with anything that you need to close the complex sale or get the meeting. And you can check out them at b2brevenue.com. So that's it. I really appreciate it. And please tell somebody about the podcast and let me know if I can help you in any way. Oh, and you want to hear some results from the course? Well, here you go.
You know, I love the approach. It's working for me just fantastic. If I sent you some of the emails, which I should, the conversations that I'm having with people, I think you'd be blown away because they're not really about work. Yeah. I've figured out if you can kind of get personal with them, like one lady, it's all about her family, kids. And then I sprinkled in a little bit around work, and she's LinkedIn, sending me messages on LinkedIn, photos of her family. No, I'm not even kidding. I should show this to you. You'd be stunned. I was shocked. And we're going to lunch on September 6th. And yesterday she shot me a LinkedIn message and said, "Hey, Ron, why don't we get on the phone and do a video call beforehand so our lunch isn't so awkward? We're like barely not meeting each other for the first time." Oh, holy cow, right? Like, this is unbelievable. So this is not the first time that this has happened. She's kind of an extreme, but I'm starting to figure out a pattern where I can actually make this a process, you know? So
good. Yeah.
I'll show you that. So it's getting to that point. And every time I do this, I'm like, God, this is unbelievable, you know? So,
and it feels better too, doesn't it?
Oh, Brian, let me tell you something. To be able to go to lunch with her, I'll even talk to her on the phone, right? We're going to talk about family, kids, work-life harmony, because I shared a thing with her from Bezos about work-life harmony. This is where the conversation will start. Now, at some point, we're both not stupid, right? We know we're going to talk about work. We know why we're both there. Right. But to kick it off this way is so much better. And to end that lunch with the last 5 to 8 minutes of telling, well, what are you guys doing with digital